the music connects one person to another, the artist to the listener. So in
Yeah.
my time, in that case, music used to be great, from Linkin Park or Eminem. I want to ask you that at your time, your early 90s, so what music was then and what music is now for you?
Yeah, like he has listened to, I think Pradeep has listened to the songs of 60s or 80s also, if I'm not wrong,
Yeah.
or
See,
1800s also. Yeah,
exactly. So if you go back to music, right? So I'll talking about old and new music. Music dates back to civilized humans whenever they started.
Yeah.
Okay, right from the tribal age, and then
yes,
mainly the music was propagated through church. Okay,
Hmm.
and these days we are able to sit down at home and listen because we have recorded music which reproduces. But if you
yes,
take the olden days until maybe 100 years ago, music was performed at a center and you have to be there. Nobody had the luxury of listening to a song repeatedly like we do today.
Right.
It was
right, right.
all it was all church music for a long time. For a long time, it was only the voice, and later, like we had the instruments and drums and whatever, everything came by. And the music had since the church promoted all the music, it was only devotional church Western music in the classical world. I'm talking about like Europe. Then what
Sure.
happened? Then the Protestant movement came.
Yeah,
Okay, when the Protestant movement came, they were trying to slightly go against the church, and that's when what they did, they brought these composers. Until this time, the composers they need food, right? They were sponsored by the church, they were given money, they were given shelter at the church. So all the music they made was in praise of the Lord. But when Protestants came, they wanted to give a twist. So they started funding these composers to come out and make music which is outside devotional. And that's when all the other classical compositions started to come. So I'm going right from way back. Okay.
oh my
So
god, yeah, yeah,
that is how it proceeded, and there was a lot of like classical music going on. And I do a fast forward to the late 1800s, where we have the blues music, which is popular kind of music now in the last century, basically which was slave music, like people who are like African Americans, they were slaves and they were singing their plight basically. Those days you have to work hard, come 6 o'clock in the evening, there is
yeah,
no light or anything. Okay, you have to work, and to keep the group momentum, they used to sing about their difficult plight. And it was I've told you, Shivam, already, like it was more like a call and response. So you
exactly.
listen to any blues song, it's a call and response. There's a group of maybe sharecroppers or somebody. There's this lead guy who is taking the lead and asking a question, and the group is like responding to that. So that is how
Yeah,
the blues music developed. And in parallel, there was this jazz movement which was coming up. Okay, jazz was coming up in the clubs and bars where people can come and just freak out and dance. Blues is more like on the fields and those areas. Jazz was more at the
the
bars and clubs and so on. So that was coming
yeah,
up. Okay, and still you cannot like listen to recorded music. You did not have that luxury. So you go to a bar,
yeah,
or you know in the field somebody is singing and you listen to that, and it was going on like that. So in the
yeah,
early 1900s they started recording. Okay, so then coming further down, what happens is the still rock and roll has not come, but recorded music have started to come. And they used to, the first form of record was like these vinyl LPs, which had a terribly little playtime. Like they used to play one side of the playtime will be like 10 minutes or something approximately, because the records were spinning at 78 RPM. So
hmm,
what happened at that time is there was music, but you can record only one song on one side.
yes,
And during that era, the albums were never released, only singles were released. That's how the singles started. Because one side can hold only one song, an artist makes a song or two songs, one for each side. Or on one side they'll put the original, on the other side they'll put a demo version and then release it.
Right. Yeah.
Even at this time, you were not able to appreciate things like classical music, which is like 20 minutes, 40 minutes a piece.
Yes.
You have to break it. Nobody, only we, either the people who directly attended the live concert or the people who are listening in CDs now, had the luxury to listen to a classical symphony from start to end without without any break in between.
Yes.
Then from 75 RPM LPs came, and those were slightly better. But again, you want to listen to a classical symphony, probably it is 3 records or something. You have to keep changing the size. So that was happening. And then from the 30s, 40s, 50s, they were there, and music was still different. Music until this time was never jagged, harsh, or anything, except a few cases in classical music. Early 1900 atonal music started, but until this, it is the like oldies melodies that you listen, romantic melodies. That's how music was. And then came the age of 50s and 60s, where we started to have slowly rock and roll come into play. And another important thing is most of the music, which is popular music now, has been coming from the blues or the jazz and transformed. And there was one more movement called the R&B movement, which was from the 50s. So all of these have taken their influence from, the blues and the jazz. So bottom line is the African Americans, they have influenced the music industry a lot. And at that time, until the blacks performed, the white audience, and slowly in the 50s, 60s, people like Elvis Presley started to take their influence. And Elvis Presley is a white, and slowly people started appreciating that sort of music, and that's how it came into play. So from 60s, then came the swinging 60s. The thing about 60s is 60s the people were drugs was ruling the world, and this idea that we should be free, nobody should control us. All of these were at its peak. So combined with drugs and this free mind movement, music was going haywire. It was like nothing you have seen before. The artists became very raucous. Until the 50s, everybody were well dressed and well behaved, very neatly combed and looking very nice. Slowly, the rowdy, ragged look became very famous in the 60s, and the drug culture kicked in. So that was going on for until the 60s and the 70s. Then the 60s and 70s failed. But this era in the popular music genre, what happened in the 60s and 70s is what I consider as the peak. I'm not talking about pioneering effect. Usually we have talked about this too. Many things are pioneered, but once a new thing is pioneered, people take it and polish it and embellish it and bring to its best form. And that, according to me, happened in the 60s and the 70s, where rock was at the peak, classic rock was at its peak, R&B was at its peak, everything was awesome. Then we moved on to the 80s, where disco, the synthesizer came in. Still music was very lively, it was awesome. And slowly we walk into the 90s, still music was organic, very nice. And slowly in the mid 90s, what happens is there is a big overwhelming effect of programmed music, like what I would call drum machines, auto tuners, everything is programmed. That killed the music. And to this day, all the artists we have, in terms of the talent of the artists, we have amazing artists until now, but this programming has completely killed the soul of the music. What happens when you use something like a drum machine, like when you are normally playing a drums in your hand, the drum first has an organic sound, which was lost in the 90s because all the synthesizers and the drum machines were not. Maybe now they have more realistic sounding drums. It's a different story with technology. But at that time, the drums sounded inorganic. That was one problem. And when a human is playing, there is a small lead or lag. They are not perfect timing is not maintained in drums. There are microseconds lead and lag, which accentuates the music. And with the drum machine, it became very mechanical, straightforward, without soul, that killed the music. So for me, after the mid 90s, there are very few albums, and that too, most of the albums are from the people who are from the earlier era, and some of the new artists. So that's when you talked about Linkin Park. This is when Linkin Park and everybody is coming in. If Linkin Park has hit you so much,
Yeah.
if only you travel back, you are going to have a wonderful time, I would say, because there is such rich music in the popular music itself. Just rock and roll and jazz and blues and whatever. But this is only one part. The biggest problem that we have is everything is only whatever is made, made free, whatever is promoted is what we hear. So we stick to the Western genre, but music is happening in every part of the world. Japan has its own music. China has its own music. Mexico has its own music. Russia has its own music. Everybody have their music. I encourage all the younger generation who are passionate about music to stop pursuing, just what is given at your hand. Rather, you go and reach out into various things, various different type of music. That will be a very, very enriching experience. And also,
Yeah.
do not decide any music, if you just by listening to it one time and don't say, I don't like this. It is like meeting a new person. First you say hi, then you say hello, then you shake their hand, then you maybe go out for a dinner with them and you have a chat. Slowly you get accustomed to that person. But most of the time, what people do is by the time they say hi, they say, this is not my guy, bye bye. That should not be the case. So I always encourage people to sit back. If you find a new song, just let it play. Don't judge the song. The problem is initially people immediately listening to a song, they want to say that this song is good or bad. You should get out of that. You have to just listen to the music. A song, maybe 10 times you have to listen, and then the magic happens. So that is what I would encourage all the new listeners to not be too. No point listening to 100 songs. You listen to 10 songs properly, it gives you immense pleasure.
Yes, and I really appreciate the effort. Really, you told whole history of the music, and that's really amazing. And
That shows how he loves music, how much he loves music,
that not only shows that how he loves, we cannot judge it even because he really loves music too much.
Yeah.
But that shows that at this present age how much less knowledge we were having
Exactly.
about music.
Exactly.
Like we will be only listening to this 10 years of music, like from Linkin Park, starting from Backyard Streets. But when I also started with the journey with Mr. Pradeep and went to the blues and touched the bit of classical, and that music is so much enriched with soul, and you will love it.